Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me for part three of our spinal mobilization series. So, in part three, we're going to be revisiting some of what we were doing in part two, but we're going to be growing a little further away from the floor. So, taking up a little more real estate on our mats. And of course, I am seated on a chair, so that's a good indicator that we're going to have something to sit on. So, you don't have to have a folding chair like this, but the edge of a bed, a desk chair, a table chair, the couch will work. We're going to have a blanket if you like to have something underneath your knees, and we're going to have two blocks. So you might take a pause here on this video and just go gather up your props and then hit play when we're ready to go, because I'm ready to go. So we're going to find our seated position, and let's have these feet hip distance apart. You could just bring your hands to rest on your thighs. In fact, you could slide these hands all the way over to kind of hold on to your knees. And we're going to do some seated cat-cow. So spinal undulations. We've been doing these from our tabletop position. We've been doing these from a supine position on our back. So let's play with it seated here. So you're going to round your spine, kind of rolling back towards your tailbone, and tuck your chin. And then start to come through your neutral spine and lift the heart space. Let's see if we can get this movement to come all the way from the pelvis to the crown of the head, kind of broadening across the collarbones. You can see my hands are kind of sliding back on my thighs. And then we'll do that again, moving through that spinal flexion and moving through your spinal extension. So seated cat-cows. And we'll find this maybe two more times, just gently warming up the spine. I don't know if you're putting part one, part two, and part three all together, or maybe it's a totally separate day. So always worthy of just kind of warming up the spine here. All right, after this last extension, let's come into our neutral spine. And I really want us to find an elongated spine. So notice if you're in what we like to call slouch asana, right? Kind of seated in your chair like this. And if so, let's find this intention to grow up out of the pelvis, right? We don't need to tip forward in the pelvis, but we'll find a nice neutral spine. And then from here, we're going to take this into figure four. So if you remember from the end of part two, right, figure four is kind of our quintessential low back release. So we're going to head right on into a seated figure four. So let's get started on the right side. You're going to lift the right knee. Externally rotate your leg. Go ahead and bring your ankle to rest on your thigh. And we're going to use the peace fingers here on your right hand. So the first two fingers are going to reach for this big toe. And we're manually going to pull your foot back. So you're pulling your foot into a little bit of dorsiflexion. And you'll notice again that as soon as we bring this foot into dorsiflexion, there's a little deeper stretch in the glute medius, in the piriformis, at the back of the hip there on that right side. So notice again, before we start to tip forward with the torso, if your body has dropped back into that slouch, right? Like you're rolling towards the tailbone. And again, we're going to find this nice tall spine. You're going to keep that length in your spine, and we're going to start to tip forward. We don't even have to go that far to find a nice big stretch. In fact, we're going to look for maybe 65, 70% of our end range here. I want you to make sure that you can access your breath, right? When we start holding the breath, we hold those tension patterns. So this is all about releasing the tension, right? The stiff achiness that settles into the low back when we've been seated for a long time. So maybe this is something that you bring into your daily practice, right? Especially if we work on the computer quite a bit, it can be nice to just kind of pause and stretch this beautiful body. Take another round of breath or two. Maybe a nice big open mouth exhale. And then go ahead and release your toe. You're going to manually lift your leg. I want you to use your arms here, a little bit of physical manual rotation. So pick up your leg, bring it back into its neutral, and then go ahead and deliver that right foot all the way to the floor. And we'll take it right on in to the left side. So you're going to lift, letting those arms do all the work. You're going to externally rotate. Ankle comes to rest on your thigh. You're finding your fingers again here. First two fingers on the left hand, reaching for that big toe and manually pulling back. And can we notice again that that is directly connected to finding a little more stretch in the outer hips? So we're going to check in one more time with the spine, because I know we have a tendency, or the body has a tendency, to kind of want to round it towards the tailbone. So see where you're at. Find that length in your spine, and then we'll keep that length as we start to tip forward. And I want to remind you here that this side might be very different from the first side. So we really want to meet ourselves where we're at. I want your breath to really be your measure of where you're going in this. As soon as you start to hold your breath, we're really pushing a little too far. So back off your edge, right? Let that be a metaphor for life. And find your place where you can breathe. Maybe some nice big in-breaths. Maybe some nice big surrendered out-breaths. Remembering that we are empowered to rewrite, right, the tension patterns that the body holds on our behalf. And that is where you are right now, in that place of empowerment. So take another round of breath. And at the bottom of your exhale, we're going to release this toe. Whew. We're going to pick up this leg, a little manual rotation as you bring your leg back into neutral and you release your foot to the earth. And we're going to use this chair for one more thing. So go ahead and come up into a standing position. I'm going to turn my chair to the side here. And we're going to find some nice elongation for your spine using the chair. And we'll be here for a little bit so that we can access our respiratory diaphragm. Now, my chair is fairly low, so I always want to give you an option if your chair is too low and you're finding that you're really rounding your spine to come down to your forearms. Throw a cushion on the chair and bring that seat up to you a little bit. We also don't need to keep the feet hip distance apart here. You can take your feet a little bit wider. And then once we find the shape that we're coming into, you're going to drop this down to forearms. You're going to let your forehead come to rest on those forearms. My feet are not close to my chair. In fact, they're a couple of feet away from my chair. So allow yourself to find some space here. Walk those legs as wide as they need to. Maybe do a couple of bends and extensions through the knee joint. And then ultimately, we are going to settle into this place. So this is really some nice elongation for your spine, especially if we kind of keep sliding these feet back just a little bit. And I want you to notice while we're here, what is going on with your breath, right? What's going on with the abdominal wall? And if we're really holding tension around the belly, while we're here in this place, right, getting a nice stretch for the back body, could we soften the belly so we can start to more deeply receive that respiratory breath, right? The breath that moves down into our diaphragm. And just see, right? Check in to see with where your body is breathing you here. And if we're really breathing still shallowly into the upper chest, see if we can bring some intentionality towards softening the abdominal wall, letting that breath move in and down, expanding as it goes, and then really surrendering the full length of that exhale. We're going to do this 3 more times, right? Full commitment exhalations. This is a really sweet way to release some of that tension, some of that stiffness, some of that achiness that settles into the back body. All right, as you start to come to the bottom of this next exhalation, right, you can come back to your natural rhythmic breath. And we're actually not going to come all the way up into an upright position. You're going to walk your feet back in so they're hip distance apart. And you're going to start to step yourself just a little bit further away from that chair or the couch or the bed, whatever it was that you were using. And we're going to take it back into that rag doll. Remember, I said we were going to be visiting some things that we were doing in part 2. And here we are in our rag doll. So a little more decompression for the spine. Little more stretch for the hamstrings here. I'm sure you're connecting to all of these beautiful sensations in your body, and maybe you're finding a little bit of sway here side to side. We're only going to be here for another breath or two. All right, as you come back through center, if you are swaying, let's bend the knees enough to get your hands to the floor. And you're going to step one leg back and then the other so you can lower your knees and come down to your mat. Maybe your blanket, right? You might have your blanket underneath your knees. And I'm going to take a moment to kind of slide this chair out of the way. So we're done with that. If you need to adjust the way that things are set up, go ahead and adjust. And then from here, we're going to come into our tabletop position. And we're going to take and do what I like to call distorted tabletop. So you're going to walk your knees one knee distance wider, and you're going to tuck these toes. And then we're going to start to set our hips back towards the heels, and you're going to walk your hands back just a little bit closer to you. If you are not accustomed to stretching your feet, this might be a little intense, right? But it is such a good habit for us to get into, stretching the feet every day. And I'm going to invite you to find a little forearm stretch here as well, so we can turn these fingertips out towards the long edge of the mat, and then maybe go one more rotation. So these fingertips are pointing back towards you. And then from here, we're going to spend just a couple moments kind of swaying side to side, stretching into the tarsals and the metatarsals, right? The toe bones and the finger bones. We know that stretching into the feet keeps our knees healthy, keeps our hips healthy, and, another good habit to get into every day is stretching your feet. So take another couple of moments here, and let's make sure we're breathing, right? We're not holding that breath. Sometimes the sensations get strong and we tend to hold. So keep breathing, keep smiling, keep shining. And as we come back through to center, we'll pause. And you can turn your hands back around, and we'll bring these knees back in. Say hallelujah. We're going to come off those tucked toes, and you're going to come to the tops of your feet. So more plantar flexion. I'll move these blocks so you can kind of see what I'm doing here. And again, we're going to come back into something that we were doing in part 2. So you're going to take and let your spine round over these legs for what we like to call embryo pose. And we're going to do a little lateral stretching here. So let's start to walk these arms over to the left and really root those hands to the floor. And then drop your hips to the right. And there's that beautiful side stretch. And again, maybe we're feeling that stretch move all the way down into the outer hips here. We've got that sweet little squeeze in the groin and behind the knees. And then from here, let's bring arms and hips back to center. And we'll take it over to the other side. So walk your arms over to the right, let your hips drop to the left. Remember, we're really trying to root these hands so that we can still traction the spine. All right, from here, let's bring hips and arms back to center. And we're going to lift these hips, come back up into your tabletop position. And if you're using a blanket, let's take a moment to fold the blanket back so that you have something underneath your knees, but we'll have our hands and our feet to the sticky mat. And now we're in our classical quadruped. So you've got your knees underneath your hips, you've got your wrists underneath your shoulders, and we're going to come back into these spinal undulations, right? AKA cat-cow. So you're going to drop the belly, lift the heart, lift the gaze, and then round your spine and tuck your chin. All right, let's do it again. You're going to come into that spinal extension, so pelvis tilts forward, broaden between the collarbones, lift the heart, lift the gaze, and then roll back into that cat shape, that spinal flexion. And let's go ahead and hold the cat this time and press your hips back towards your heels. Can we keep those hands rooted? And then from here, lift back up into that tabletop, come into that cow shape again. And we're going to tuck the toes here and you're going to lift your hips up and back for downward facing dog. All right, from your downward facing dog, let's take some moments to kind of pedal and stretch. We've already really been stretching into your hamstrings, but I don't know, I can always feel my calves here. And we know that tight calves, remember from our part 2, tight calves are really a culprit of low back tension. So take some moments to stretch the backs of your legs. In fact, we're going to come all the way back into that rag doll. So walk your hands back towards your feet and let's find that nice bend to your knees. Grab your elbows, drop the crown of your head. We'll take it into a little more release for the low back here. So find that exaggerated bend on your right knee. And bring your right elbow to touch that right leg. Lift your left elbow and look underneath. And then bring it back through to center and let's switch sides. Find that really exaggerated bend to the left knee. Left elbow comes to touch the left leg wherever it touches and you're lifting that right elbow to look underneath, right? So now we're really warming up this beautiful spine. All right, from here, let's bring it all the way back through to center. You're going to bend your knees enough to get your hands to the floor. Walk yourself back to that downward facing dog shape. And we're going to pause here for a moment to remember our breath. So nice big in breath, nice big out breath. And then we're going to lift these heels, come way up onto the ball mounds of your feet, and then lower your knees again. And we're going to move through that one more time. So let's take it into the spinal extension, your cow shape. And then, of course, move the opposite way, move into the spinal flexion. And let's set the hips back towards the heels. Can we keep those hands rooted? And then come back up into that tabletop and come into the cow shape, spinal extension. Tuck your toes and lift your hips up and back for that downward facing dog. Let's do a couple more moments of pedaling and stretching through the backs of the legs. And then rather than walking your hands back to your feet, we're actually going to walk our feet to our hands. And then once you get to the top, right, keep the knees as bent as you need to get there. You're going to take your hands to your shins. And we'll inhale, slide the hands up the shins. And I want you to see if you can keep length in your spine. And then slide the hands down. Let's do it a couple more times. Slide the hands up. And slide the hands down. So there's no cat or cow here. There's just neutral spine. One more time. Slide your hands up. Slide your hands down. And from here, we're going to sit back as if you were sitting using that chair, right? But we're not. We're imagining we've got a chair. And you can fly your arms back. We're going to press through those feet, sweep your arms out wide, come all the way up. And then I'll meet you in this standing position. We can pull the hands down through the midline. And I want you to take a little notice of what your spine is doing here, right? We tend to come into this standing position, and so many of us lock the knees, right? We kind of lock everything up to find this bipedal position. So I want to see if we can retrain that, find a little softness in our stance, right? So maybe a little bit of softness in the knees. A little bit of a drop to the tailbone, a little more lengthening into that lumbar spine. We notice that when we drop the tailbone, we get a little lift to the base of the skull. And all of this really lifts some of the compression out of the back body. All right, we are up in our standing position. So remember I said we were going to take some of the same shapes that we learned in part 2. And we're going to take up a little more real estate here from our standing position. So let's go ahead and have these blocks. We're all going to turn to face the long edge of your mat, and you can set your blocks down in front. So we'll kind of forget about those for a little bit. And we're going to take a wide stance. So if you look at the negative space, right, between my legs, we're really looking for kind of an equal-sided triangle. It's super stable in this position. And then we're going to pick up your left heel, and we'll turn the left heel out. So you get a little more internal rotation on your left leg. And then we're going to turn the right toes out. So that's an external rotation. I actually want you to take your right hand to the inner thigh on your right leg. And we're going to take a bend into this right knee, and you'll slide this hand down towards your knee. So we're kind of guiding your knee to stay in line with your ankle and your toes. All right, straighten your leg, slide your hand back up. And let's do this again, but this time as you bend that right knee, float the left arm up. It's like walking and chewing gum at the same time. All right, lower your arm, straighten your leg. Let's do it a couple more times. Right, warming up the joints here. Lower your arm, straighten your leg. One more time. And then straighten right leg, lower left arm. All right, this time as you come into that shape, we're pausing. And you're going to go ahead and float that right arm up as well. So this is what we call Virabhadrasana 2, right? Some of you might be familiar with Warrior 2. All right, from here, we're going to take it into an extended side angle, which is a lateral stretch for your spine again. So we're going to take this right elbow to your right thigh, and you'll sweep your left arm in front and then alongside your ear. So you might remember this from part 2, right? You've got a nice side stretch here through your left side body. And then remember that big giant clock. You're going to take this left arm and you're going to reach up towards 12 o'clock. And then you're going to take and thread the needle. You're going to reach this arm underneath that right thigh and stretch. And then keep your spine right where it is. Let's take that left arm alongside your ear like a half bird dog. And then we're going to press through that right foot to circle all the way up and back to that reverse warrior, the one that we refer to as peaceful warrior. All right, we're going to move through that one more time. So float yourself up to Warrior 2. Let's come into that extended side angle, sweeping that left arm in front, feeling that nice elongation to the spine here. And then we point up towards 12 o'clock on our imaginary clock. And then we're going to thread underneath like a little swan dive and reach. And then from here, keep this shape with the torso. Left arm comes alongside your ear like a bird dog. And then you're pressing through that right foot to support you as you circle backwards into reverse. And then from here, I'll meet you back in that Warrior 2. And we'll go ahead and lower these arms, and you can straighten the front leg, and we'll parallel our feet. And I think before we take that through to the second side, we'll find what I like to call a palate cleanser. We're going to come all the way back to center. So turn the heels in, toes in, heels in, toes in, heels in, until you're all the way back in your standing position. Then we'll take it back out wide. It's a little bit of a sorbet, right? Palate cleanser, a little bit of a reset. And then you're going to pick up your right heel, turn the right heel out, Pick up the left toes, turn the left toes out. Let's take that left hand to the inner seam of your thigh. Bend your knees, slide your hand down, and then straighten the leg. Okay. Walk and chew gum at the same time. Bend the knee, float that right arm up. And then straighten your leg, float the right arm down. Let's do it a couple more times, right? Kind of moving through the joints, moving through the fascia. And then the next time we've got that bend to the front knee, we'll pause. You'll float your left arm up too. So there's really this expansive shape, right, of warrior two, reaching out and away from the heart space. So we're going to start to bring the spine back into it. So let's bring this left elbow to the left thigh. Sweep the right arm in front, and let's find that elongation and that side stretch. And then reach up towards 12 o'clock. And then thread the needle. So a little bit of spinal flexion and a little bit of rotation. Okay, keep this shape with the torso, but sweep this right arm alongside your ear. And then let's do that backwards sort of cartwheel, right? Backwards circle, coming all the way back into that back bend, right? Peaceful warrior. All right, let's do it one more time. Float yourself up. And then let's take a bend to that left elbow, sweeping right arm in front. Right arm goes up to 12 o'clock. And then we're threading, diving underneath and reaching. All right, keep the torso where it is. Sweep your arms straight ahead. And then big circle up to the sky. Follow with that left arm. Come all the way back into peaceful warrior. And then from here, lift the heart space. I'll meet you here. Lower the arms. Let's straighten the legs. And then parallel these feet. And we'll heel toe all the way back to center. So coming back in for our spinal reset. Okay, we left those blocks down in front. So we're going to take a step wide one more time on this mat. Let's look to see that our feet are parallel, or maybe even turn your toes in a little bit. When we get this internal rotation in the legs, it helps open up the back body, right? Open up that space around that SI joint. And then we'll take these hands to the IT band, the outer edges of your legs. Keep your spine nice and long. And we'll start to slide these hands down the outer edges of our legs until your torso is parallel to the floor. And then from here, you left these blocks right down in front. So we'll go ahead and take the hands to the blocks. I have my blocks on a medium setting. You could turn them to a tall setting. Remember, they're not as stable when they're on a tall setting, but find what works for you. I'm going to do medium. And you've got one underneath each shoulder. And then from here, we're going to walk these arms forward. You'll keep those blocks in line with your shoulders. And then we're going to pull the hips back. So it's almost like that downward facing dog, right? That traction, that elongation in the spine. But we've got this beautiful wide stance with your feet, maybe a little internal rotation on those feet, opening up across the back of the pelvis. Just a beautiful stretch. It's almost like where we were with the chair at the beginning of your practice. So I'm going to give us an option to take a little under twist here, and then we're making our way all the way back to the floor. So let's keep that right hand to the block. Take the left arm, thread it underneath the right arm, and you're going to reach for that right leg. You're going to drop that left shoulder and do a little bit of that transverse plane of motion, right? We do a little twist, kind of looking underneath the right arm. And then release that right hand back to the block, or the left hand back to the block, and thread the needle here, reaching right arm underneath the left, reaching for that left leg, and then dropping that right shoulder and looking underneath. All right, from here, we're going to release two hands, go back to the blocks, walk your blocks back in, and we're actually going to turn and pivot with these blocks. So kind of turn and pivot, Pivot your feet, walk with the blocks, and eventually you're kind of in what we call a runner's lunge facing the front of your mat. And we'll lower the back knee and we'll slide that front foot back. And from here, you're going to take your blocks and just place them off to the side. We're going to reach for that chair again. So this time, we're going to use this chair for really sweet release in the back body. And here's where we're going to go. You're going to be taking your calves up into this chair. So I'm going to sit sideways to it, and then I'm going to swing one leg up and swing the other. So if you're using a bed, right, this might not be available. You might need to find a chair where this works for you. All right, if the bed is unavailable, a chair is not available, you could always swing your legs up the wall. But the idea here is that we're getting a little bit of a gentle inversion here. And after all that movement, right, maybe you put part 1, part 2, and part 3 together. We want to find a place where we can really kind of settle in here. So I'm going to invite you to bring one hand and just place it on your heart, and one hand and place it on your abdomen. Close your eyes and feel, right, your body breathing, feel your heart beating. I really want to give us an invitation to drop in here for 3-4 minutes. In fact, if you put all 3 parts together here in this series, we really want to give ourselves a good 5, 6, 7 minutes to integrate the practice. If you are doing these separately, right, part 1 on one day, part 2 on the other, part 3, give yourself permission to drop in here for maybe 3 minutes, right? Maybe 4 minutes. Whether you have your legs in your chair, or maybe legs up the wall, or maybe you're in constructive rest, right? Kind of where we ended part 1 and part 2. And we're going to do a nice big in-breath here. Open your mouth and really surrender that exhale. You can even make it slightly audible, really releasing tension, rewriting those tension patterns. And we'll find a few more moments just to be. Right? We took the spine again in this entire series into all of its planes of movement. Sagittal plane, that forward and back, and our gentle rotation, that transverse plane, and then the side stretching, right? That coronal plane. And now we really want to let the spine just come into its place of beautiful neutrality. And nothing like it than getting the spine on the floor and swinging the legs up in some way. So really give yourself permission to be here, just like stretching into the feet. This is something you could do on a daily basis. I'm going to leave you here and say thank you again so much for joining me for this series. I hope it is serving you in some way. And salud. Here is to our health.